Last time, we stood before the pyramids of Giza, structures so precise, so impossibly old, that no one has been able to explain how they were built. Tonight, we travel somewhere even stranger, higher, colder, more remote, to a place where the stones are not merely large, they are impossible. 13,000 feet above sea level, in the thin air of the Bolivian Altiplano, where the sky is closer, and the oxygen is scarce, and the wind has not stopped blowing for 10,000 years. Here, on a treeless plain near the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, lie the ruins of something that should not exist. Puma Punku. The name comes from the Aymara language. It means the door of the puma. What remains today looks like the aftermath of an explosion. Massive stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, scattered across a field as if thrown by something enormous. Walls toppled, platforms shattered, foundations exposed to the wind. At first glance, it looks like rubble, like the ruins of ruins, like the memory of a place that was already ancient when the first people of the Andes found it. But look closer, look at the surfaces, look at the edges, look at the cuts, and the questions begin. The stones of Puma Punku are not rough, they are not piled, they are not stacked in the way you might stack boulders to build a wall. They are machined. That is the only word that applies. Flat surfaces, polished to a mirror finish. Right angles, precise to within fractions of a millimeter. Channels and grooves, cut with tolerances that would satisfy a modern engineer. The signature piece of Puma Punku is the H-block, a flat rectangular stone, roughly the size of a dining table, with a complex series of channels, grooves and interlocking slots cut into its face. Each H-block is identical to the others. Not approximately identical, not roughly similar, identical, as if cut from a template, as if produced by a machine. The channels are the same width, the grooves are the same depth, the slots interlock at the same angles, every single time, across dozens of blocks, with no visible tool marks, no chisel scars, no evidence of hand carving of any kind. We are told these were made by hand, by a civilization that had no iron, no steel, no writing system, no wheel. At 13,000 feet, where the air is thin and the body tires quickly, where transporting even a small stone requires extraordinary effort. Someone cut diorite and andesite with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Diorite. It is important to understand what diorite is. Diorite is one of the hardest stones on Earth. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, it sits between 6 and 7. For comparison, granite is also 6 to 7. Steel is approximately 6.5, which means you cannot cut diorite with steel. Not easily. Not precisely. You can grind it slowly, with diamond-tipped tools and enormous patience. But you cannot carve channels into diorite with the precision found at Puma Punku, using stone hammers and copper chisels. You simply cannot. Today, cutting stone to the tolerances found at Puma Punku requires diamond-tipped saws, computer-guided cutting machines, and significant electrical power. The surfaces left behind by these modern tools look almost identical to the surfaces at Puma Punku. That is not a coincidence. That is a clue. Jean-Pierre Protzen, a professor of architecture at the University of California, Berkeley, spent years studying the stones of Puma Punku. He attempted to replicate the precision using the tools supposedly available to the ancient builders. Stone hammers, bronze instruments, abrasive sand. His results were mixed. He could produce flat surfaces, eventually, after enormous effort. But the internal right angles, the uniform channels, the interlocking grooves cut to identical dimensions across multiple blocks. He could not replicate those, not with any combination of primitive tools, not even close. Puma Punku is not alone on the Altiplano. Less than a kilometer away stands Tiwanaku, a larger complex, a city, or what remains of one. Tiwanaku was the capital of an empire that, according to the mainstream timeline, flourished between approximately 300 and 1000 AD. It spread across parts of modern-day Bolivia, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. At its peak, it may have been home to 40,000 people. The centerpiece of Tiwanaku is the Sacsayhuaman, a large rectangular enclosure bounded by standing stones. Some of these stones weigh over 100 tons. They were quarried from a site over 10 miles away and brought to this plateau, at 13,000 feet, by methods that no one has been able to convincingly explain. Within the Sacsayhuaman stands the Gate of the Sun, a single block of andesite, weighing approximately 10 tons, carved with an elaborate scene. At the center, a figure. Radiating lines extend from its head in all directions, flanked by rows of attendant figures, some with wings, some with staffs. The central figure is believed to represent Viracocha, the creator god of the Andes, the one who, according to legend, emerged from Lake Titicaca and taught the people everything they knew. Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, sitting at 12,500 feet above sea level, straddling the border of Bolivia and Peru. The lake is ancient, its waters are cold and extraordinarily deep, and at its bottom divers have found something remarkable. Stone walls, paved roads, what appear to be terraced structures, submerged beneath 40 meters of water. In 2004, an archaeological expedition led by the Geographical Exploring Society documented a stone temple beneath the surface of Lake Titicaca. The structure measured approximately 200 meters long, with walls, with terraces, with what appeared to be a paved courtyard. Underwater, at 12,500 feet, for those structures to now be 40 meters below the waterline, they would have had to be built when the lake was significantly smaller, or when the land was significantly lower. Both scenarios point to the same conclusion. Those structures are very, very old. Older than the mainstream dating of Tiwanaku. Possibly thousands of years older. The dating of Puma Punku is contentious. The mainstream archaeological consensus places its construction between approximately 500 and 600 AD. This dating is based primarily on carbon-14 analysis of organic material found near the site. But carbon-14 dates the organic material, not the stone. The organic material could have been deposited at any time, centuries or millennia after the stones were placed. Arthur Poznański, a Bolivian-Austrian engineer and archaeologist, spent 50 years studying Tiwanaku and Puma Punku. From 1904 until his death in 1946, he made a claim that was dismissed by the academic establishment, but has never been conclusively disproven. Poznański measured the alignment of the Sacsayhuaman temple. He found that its walls were oriented to the solstices, but not to the solstices of today, to the solstices of a different era. The Earth's axial tilt changes slowly over time. This is called the obliquity of the ecliptic. It cycles between approximately 22.1 degrees and 24.5 degrees, over a period of roughly 41,000 years. Poznański calculated that the Sacsayhuaman's alignment corresponded to an axial tilt of approximately 23 degrees 8 minutes and 48 seconds. That tilt last occurred approximately 15,000 years ago, 15,000 years, not 600 AD, not 1000 AD, 15,000 years before the present. If Poznański was right, Tiwanaku was built at the end of the last ice age, before agriculture, before pottery, before the first cities of Mesopotamia existed, before the pyramids, before everything we believe came first. The academic establishment dismissed his work, not because his measurements were wrong. His astronomical calculations were checked and found to be mathematically sound. They were dismissed because the conclusion was unacceptable. A 15,000-year-old city, on the Altiplano of Bolivia, built by people who should not have existed. That could not be allowed. And so it was not. Return to the stones, because the stones do not care about academic consensus. The stones simply are what they are. At Puma Punku, several blocks contain drill holes, perfectly circular, perfectly straight, poured into diorite, one of the hardest stones on the planet. The interior walls of these drill holes are smooth, not rough, not irregular, smooth, as if cut by a core drill, a rotating hollow cylinder, tipped with something harder than the stone itself, spinning at high speed, leaving a perfectly cylindrical bore. We use core drills today, with diamond tips and electric motors. The ancient builders of Puma Punku had neither, or so we are told. Then there are the internal corners. In several of the H-blocks, channels intersect at perfect right angles. The inside corners of these intersections are sharp, crisp, not rounded, not chipped, sharp. To achieve a sharp internal corner in stone, you cannot use a circular saw or a grinding wheel, because circular tools leave a radius. They leave a curve where two cuts meet. To get a sharp internal corner, you need either a very small chisel struck with extraordinary precision, or a technology we do not associate with the ancient world. Laser cutting produces sharp internal corners. So does wire EDM, electrical discharge machining. So do certain ultrasonic cutting techniques. The ancient builders of Puma Punku achieved sharp internal corners in diorite, and no one can explain how. 13,000 feet. The air at this altitude contains roughly 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Physical labor is difficult. Sustained heavy labor, the kind required to quarry, transport, and precision-cut 100-ton stone blocks, is extraordinarily demanding. The stones of Puma Punku were quarried from two primary sources. The red sandstone blocks came from a quarry approximately 10 kilometers away. The andesite and diorite blocks, the precision-cut ones, came from a quarry on the western shore of Lake Titicaca, 90 kilometers away. 56 miles, 90 kilometers across a high-altitude plateau with no navigable rivers between the quarry and the site. No paved roads, no wheeled vehicles, no draft animals large enough to move a 100-ton stone. The largest blocks at Puma Punku weigh approximately 131 metric tons. To move a 131-ton block of andesite across 56 miles of high-altitude terrain, without wheels, without roads, without engines, is a problem that modern engineers would struggle with today. The largest mobile cranes in the world can lift approximately 1,200 tons, but they cannot carry that load across 56 miles of uneven terrain. The Romans, who were among the greatest engineers of the ancient world, moved stones of up to 300 tons at Baalbek. But they had roads, they had harbors, they had pulleys and levers and thousands of trained soldiers, and they were at sea level, not at 13,000 feet, not in thin air, not across a barren plateau. Perhaps the most remarkable feature of Puma Punku is how the stones fit together. They were designed as a system, not stacked, not mortared, interlocked, like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle. The H-blocks contain channels that held metal clamps. These clamps, shaped like the letter I or the letter T, locked adjacent blocks together. The clamps were made of a copper-arsenic-nickel alloy, a bronze-like material that was poured molten into the channels, which means the builders had metallurgical knowledge. They could smelt ore. They could create alloys. They could pour molten metal with precision into channels cut into stone at 13,000 feet above sea level. The channels for these clamps are not rough gouges. They are precisely cut. Uniform width, uniform depth, with clean edges. The molten metal fit the channel exactly. This was not improvisation. This was engineering. Sophisticated, planned, repeatable engineering. When archaeologists attempted to reconstruct how the blocks might have fit together, they found that the system was modular, interchangeable, The same H-block pattern could lock into multiple configurations, like a construction set, like Lego, designed by someone who understood standardization, mass production, interchangeable parts. Concepts we believe were invented during the Industrial Revolution, in the 18th century, not in the mountains of Bolivia, not thousands of years ago. The Aymara people, the indigenous inhabitants of the Altiplano, have a legend. They say that Puma Punku was built in a single night by giants who came from the sky. The Inca, who conquered the region centuries later, found Tiwanaku already in ruins, already ancient, already a mystery to the people who lived beside it. The Inca asked the Aymara, "Who built this?" The Aymara said, "We do not know. It was here before us. It was here before anyone." The Inca themselves were extraordinary builders. The walls of Cusco, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, are among the most impressive stone constructions in the Americas. Massive polygonal blocks, fitted so tightly that a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. But the Inca looked at Puma Punku and said, "We did not build this. This was here before us. This was built by the gods." If the Inca, master builders who constructed Machu Picchu and the road network of an empire, could not explain Puma Punku, what does that tell us? It tells us that whatever built Puma Punku predated the Inca by a very long time. Long enough that even the memory of who built it had been lost, replaced by myth, by stories of giants, by stories of gods who came from the sky. 1,000 kilometers to the north, in the mountains above the city of Cusco, stands another impossibility. Sacsayhuaman. The name means the satisfied hawk. It is a fortress, or a temple, or both, built on a ridge above Cusco, with 3 parallel walls that zigzag across the landscape like a lightning bolt. The walls are massive. The largest stones weigh up to 200 metric tons. 200 tons. That is the weight of a loaded semi-truck, multiplied by 6. These stones are fitted into a wall without mortar, without cement, without any binding agent whatsoever, just placed one upon another with such precision that a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. The joints are perfect, sharp, clean, as if the stones were cut, not by hand, but by something that understood geometry. The stones are not rectangular. That is the remarkable part. They are polygonal. Each one has a unique shape. No 2 stones are identical, yet each one fits its neighbors with millimeter precision. It is as if someone took a puzzle with hundreds of thousands of pieces and solved it in stone. The conventional dating places Sacsayhuaman in the 15th century AD, built by the Inca around 1440, but the Inca themselves left no records of building it. No chroniclers documented its construction. No Spanish conquistador wrote of witnessing the building. It was simply there, already ancient when the Spaniards arrived. In fact, the Spanish tried to dismantle Sacsayhuaman for building materials for their colonial structures. They had gunpowder. They had crowbars and stone tools. They had thousands of workers, and they could not move the largest stones. The walls of Sacsayhuaman still stand today, exactly as they were when the Spanish gave up trying to remove them. The question begins to form. If the Inca built Sacsayhuaman, why is it more precise than other confirmed Inca stonework? Why did the Spanish find it impossible to move when they could demolish other Inca structures? Why did they attribute it to a previous civilization, even as they attributed everything else to the Inca they had just conquered? There is evidence that some of the stones at Sacsayhuaman have been treated by heat. The surfaces show a pattern consistent with vitrification, a glassy layer, as if the stone had been exposed to extreme temperature. Not from fire, but from something more intense. Why would someone heat-treat the surface of a massive stone block before fitting it into a wall? What purpose would that serve? Vitrification hardens the surface, makes it more durable, more resistant to erosion, but it also requires knowledge of material science and access to heat that could melt the surface of stone. The tired stones are another mystery. These are enormous boulders, some weighing more than 100 tons, scattered on the hillside between Sacsayhuaman and the quarry. They appear to have been abandoned mid-transport, mid-cutting. Some show evidence of partial quarrying, sections that were carved but never separated from the bedrock. The work simply stopped. Why would the builders abandon such enormous stones? Were they waiting for something? Did the technology fail? Did the workers leave? Did something happen that caused them to walk away and never return? The builders of Sacsayhuaman possessed the knowledge to cut and move stones that would challenge modern engineers. They possessed the precision to fit them without mortar. They may have possessed the knowledge to heat-treat the surfaces for durability. And then, for reasons we cannot determine, they abandoned their work on the largest boulders, as if they had run out of time, as if something had ended. Their purpose, their ability to continue. The pattern is becoming clear. Egypt. Puma Punku. Sacsayhuaman. 3 sites, separated by thousands of kilometers, built by different cultures in different epochs, all showing the same signs. Precision, scale, knowledge that exceeds what the mainstream timeline allows, and an inexplicable relationship with stones so large, so heavy, so difficult, that moving them should have been impossible. Yet they moved them, and they fit them with a precision that has never been surpassed. Further down the sacred valley, near the Urubamba River, stands another site, smaller than Sacsayhuaman, more remote, but in some ways, more mysterious. Ollantaytambo. At the heart of Ollantaytambo lies the Temple of the Sun, a terrace built on the mountainside, bounded by 6 enormous monoliths. 6 blocks, rose-colored granite, each weighing approximately 50 metric tons. These are not rough stones, not hewn from bedrock and barely shaped. They are finished blocks, polished on the visible faces, cut with precision, fitted together with millimeter accuracy. Between the major monoliths are thin spacer stones, like shims, like someone calculated exactly how much adjustment was needed and cut a stone to fit that measurement exactly. The quarry for these stones is visible. It is 4 kilometers away, on the other side of the Urubamba River Valley, high on a mountainside. From the quarry, the massive blocks were extracted, then moved down the mountain, then transported across the river valley, then moved up the opposite mountainside, then fitted into place with precision tolerances measured in millimeters. The conventional explanation is that the Inca did this around 1440 AD, as part of the conquest of the Sacred Valley. But look at the base of Ollantaytambo. Look at the massive monoliths of the Temple of the Sun, and then look at the structures above them, the smaller stones, the rougher fit, the walls that show clear evidence of repair and modification. There are 2 distinct building styles at Ollantaytambo. The lower layer, the enormous, precisely fitted monoliths, is the work of master engineers. The upper layer, smaller stones, rougher fitting, more recent construction, is Inca work. The pattern is identical to what we see elsewhere, a foundation of precision, megalithic mastery, upon which a later civilization built, more crudely, more roughly, reusing the precision foundation as a base. Between the monoliths at the quarry site and the Temple of the Sun lies the landscape, and scattered across that landscape are enormous blocks, the tired stones of Ollantaytambo, some weighing over 100 metric tons. Many show evidence of partial cutting, channels cut into them, sections carved but not separated, as if the work was interrupted. At the quarry itself, there are mysterious marks, concave depressions carved into the bedrock, scoop marks, like something was pressed into the rock, or something was extracted by an unknown method. The conventional explanation is that these are tool marks, evidence of the quarrying process. But the pattern does not match what we see at quarries where hand tools were used. There is no scatter of chips, no evidence of hammering, just smooth depressions, as if something had scooped the stone away. The massive stone blocks at Ollantaytambo were cut from rose-colored granite. Granite sits at about 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, harder than the diorite of Puma Punku. Yet the surfaces are finished, polished, smooth, without visible tool marks. To achieve this, with the tools supposedly available to the builders, would require an effort that stretches credibility. Months of work per block, possibly years, using stone hammers, copper chisels, and abrasive sand, but the precision is too high for such primitive methods. The surfaces are too smooth, the edges too sharp, the fit too tight. The builders of Ollantaytambo transported 50-ton blocks across terrain that would challenge modern heavy equipment. They quarried them from stone harder than can easily be cut with hand tools. They fitted them with precision tolerances, measured in fractions of an inch, and they abandoned enormous, partially worked blocks mid-transport, without apparent reason. All of this according to the mainstream timeline in the space of a few decades. In the 15th century AD, when the Inca were primarily warriors and administrators, not master stoneworkers, the conventional model places the megalithic base layer at Ollantaytambo in the same epoch as Sacsayhuaman, around 1440 AD, built by Inca engineers using methods that leave no clear evidence in the historical record. But the evidence suggests something different, a much older foundation, a much more ancient source, a precision that predates the conventional dating by centuries or millennia. The pattern repeats at site after site across South America. The mega-precision base layer, the conventional dating that makes no logistical sense, the absence of contemporaneous records, the later, rougher construction layered on top. This is not coincidence. This is not misattribution of dates. This is a signature, the signature of a much older civilization, one with knowledge, technology, and capability that exceeded what we are told the ancient world possessed. And then, the knowledge ended. The capability faded. The builders moved on or disappeared. And those who came after, the Inca and their predecessors, could only work with smaller stones, could only achieve rougher fitting, could only wonder at the massive precision structures they inherited. Structures they attributed to the gods, because what else could explain them? Something destroyed Puma Punku, not gradually, not through slow decay. Something violent. The blocks are not simply fallen. They are scattered, thrown, some weighing dozens of tons, moved hundreds of meters from their original positions. Geological studies of the Altiplano have found evidence of catastrophic flooding, massive alluvial deposits, layers of sediment consistent with a sudden and enormous inflow of water. Graham Hancock has pointed out that the destruction pattern at Puma Punku is consistent with a wall of water, a flood, a sudden, overwhelming, catastrophic flood, at 13,000 feet above sea level. Lake Titicaca itself shows evidence of dramatic water level changes. Ancient shoreline markings, high above the current waterline, suggest the lake was once much larger, or that the land itself rose. The Altiplano is a tectonically active region. The Andes are still rising, still being pushed upward by the collision of the Nazca Plate with the South American Plate. What is now 13,000 feet was once lower, perhaps much lower. If Puma Punku was built at a lower elevation, before the Altiplano reached its current height, the engineering challenge changes. The oxygen problem diminishes. The transport problem becomes less extreme, but the dating problem becomes more extreme. Because if the land has risen significantly since the structures were built, we are talking about a time scale far beyond anything the mainstream accepts. There is a pattern. Egypt, now Bolivia. The same pattern. Precision that should not exist. Stones that should not have been moved. Knowledge that should not have been possessed. and a timeline that keeps reaching backward, further and further, into a past that our textbooks say was empty. Giza sits at the geographic center of the Earth's landmass. Puma Punku sits at 13,000 feet on the Altiplano. They are separated by over 6,000 miles. Different continents, different hemispheres, different cultures, different languages, different everything. And yet, the precision is the same. The scale is the same. The mystery is the same. The unanswered questions are the same. Christopher Dunn measured the granite surfaces of the Great Pyramid and found them flat to 1/10,000th of an inch. Jean-Pierre Protzen measured the surfaces at Puma Punku and found them flat to fractions of a millimeter. Both sites use stones that are among the hardest on Earth. Both sites show evidence of techniques that cannot be replicated with the tools supposedly available. Both sites have been attributed to civilizations that, according to the mainstream, had no contact with each other. And yet the results are identical. Coincidence explains one site. Coincidence does not explain two. If a pattern of impossible precision appears in Egypt, and the same pattern appears 6,000 miles away in Bolivia, then either both civilizations independently invented the same impossible techniques, or they learned from the same source. The legends of the Andes speak of Viracocha, the creator, the teacher, the one who came from the east, across the water, and taught the people of the Andes everything they knew. Agriculture, astronomy, stoneworking, the calendar. In Egypt, the legends speak of Thoth, the god of wisdom, the one who brought knowledge to the people of the Nile. Writing, mathematics, architecture, the measurement of time. In Mesoamerica, the legends speak of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the one who came from the sea and taught the people of Mexico. The calendar, agriculture, the movement of the stars, different names, different cultures, different continents, the same story, a figure who arrives from elsewhere, carrying knowledge, teaching civilization to people who had none, and then leaving or being destroyed, and the knowledge slowly fading, like a signal growing weaker over thousands of years, until all that remains is stone. The stones of Puma Punku cannot speak. They cannot tell us who cut them. They cannot tell us when. They cannot explain the drill holes, or the interlocking channels, or the mirror-flat surfaces. They simply wait, in the thin air, in the wind that has not stopped, on a plateau that was once lower and may once have been green. Whatever civilization produced these stones understood something that we have lost. Not the knowledge itself. We can cut stone with precision today, but the will to do it, the patience to do it, in a place this remote, at an elevation this extreme, with materials this difficult, to tolerances this extraordinary, for reasons we cannot determine. We came next, and like Egypt, we are only beginning to read what they wrote. The Altiplano stretches in every direction, dry and windswept and impossibly high. The mountains watch from the edges. The lake sits dark and deep and ancient to the south, and the stones lie where they fell, or where something threw them, waiting for the right question, for someone willing to look past what we are told and see what is actually there. Next, Göbekli Tepe. In southeastern Turkey, a temple complex built 12,000 years ago, 7,000 years before Stonehenge, 5,000 years before the pyramids, built by people who, according to everything we teach, were still hunter-gatherers, still nomads, still waiting for civilization to begin. And yet, they built a cathedral, and then they buried it, deliberately, as if they were hiding it from someone or for someone.